It's round 2 in Turkey. The presidential runoff is scheduled for Sunday, and it promises to be a consequential vote. First, the basics. 2 candidates are on the ballot, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. The first round ended in stalemate after neither candidate crossed 50%. So now it's time for round 2. The question is, who has the edge? From the looks of it, Erdogan. The opinion polls were expecting him to do badly, but he ended up polling 49.5%, just short of winning the whole thing. Plus, he has a new supporter, Sinan Oğan. He's a far-right candidate who came third in the first round. He polled around 5%. Earlier this week, he endorsed Erdogan. So the odds are stacked in the president's favor. Where does that leave Kılıçdaroğlu? His campaign strategy was starkly different from Erdogan. He talked about human rights, secularism and democracy. Not anymore. After the first round, he changed tack. He began appealing to Turkish nationalists. How? With a lot of refugee propaganda. Listen to this.
I declare it to all compatriots. I never sit on a table with terrorist organizations, and I never will. Period. I announce it to you here. I will send all the refugees home as soon as I come to power. Period.
They call him Turkish Gandhi, by the way. After that speech, I'm not so sure. Either way, the rhetoric seems to be working. Turkey's Victory Party has endorsed Kılıçdaroğlu. It is an ultra-nationalist party. Their platform is based on sending back Syrian refugees. So some good news for Kılıçdaroğlu. But will it be enough? Erdogan's strategy for the second round has been different. Fewer rallies, fewer rants. He's focused more on consolidating his lead. He's also visited some areas struck by the earthquake in February. Erdogan enjoys the benefit of being in power. He can control the narrative using government machinery. Just look at social media. Twitter has begun restricting certain tweets in Turkey. Why? Reports say the government is asking them to. In 2020, Erdogan passed a new media law. It requires social media platforms to censor content if the government says so. If not, there will be legal action. Many users say they are unable to view certain tweets. No guesses who these tweets criticized. The vote on Sunday promises to be fiercely contested and consequential. I know Erdogan holds the edge, but stranger things have happened in politics. A lot depends on the Kurdish vote. Some quick background here. Kurds are the largest ethnic minority in Turkey. They make up around 15 to 20% of the population. Most of them live in the east. Erdogan has made a career out of villainizing Kurds. He calls them terrorists, even separatists. But Kılıçdaroğlu is counting on their support.
Erdogan is never an option for us. The only option is to replace him and the power he stands for. Therefore, we state once again that it is extremely important and a priority for us to recognize the expectation and desire of the Kurdish people and Turkish society as a whole for democracy, law, justice, equality and freedom, and the democratic will at the ballot box.
But what would an Erdogan victory look like? Normally, re-election means status quo, a continuation of current policy. But in Turkey, it's not that simple, because Erdogan is a disruptor in Turkish politics. He's turning a secular nation into his Islamist vision. So if he wins on Sunday, here's what you can expect. More support for Islamist ideology, more persecution of Kurds, also more illogical economic policies. Let me explain. Turkish inflation is at 44%. Other countries increase interest rates to tackle inflation, but not Erdogan. He decided to cut interest rates. Why? Because the concept of high interest is banned in Islam. Such policies have resulted in many hardships for the people. Yet, his support is strong. As they say, he is a Teflon leader, but the biggest impact would be on foreign policy. Western countries would have been hoping for an Erdogan loss. His opponent is a firm supporter of NATO. He has also promised to restart talks to join the European Union. If Erdogan wins, all of that goes out of the window. He will continue to build ties with Russia. He will also remain a shaky NATO ally. India too will be watching the results closely. Erdogan has been no friend of India's. He has sided with Pakistan consistently, even raked up Kashmir at the United Nations. So along with Turks, the whole world will be waiting for Sunday's results. The US may or may not enter a recession, but Germany has, at least on paper. Europe's largest economy reported another quarter of economic contraction. Experts are blaming household spending. Germans are not spending thanks to rising inflation and expensive credit. The result? Economic activity is down. But what does a German recession mean for Europe? And should India be wary as well? Our next report tells you all about it. Germany is in recession, but don't cue the poverty pictures yet, because this is a technical one. Here's how economists define a recession: 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, in other words, contraction. That's what Germany is going through. Let's look at the numbers. In the last quarter of 2022, growth was minus 0.5%, meaning the economy shrank. In the first quarter of 2023, growth was minus 0.3%. Again, the economy shrank. So technically, Germany has entered a recession. But what led to this? Experts are blaming the German people. Household spending was down 1.2% over the same period. If people don't spend, economic activity falls. Explanation time. Russia's invasion has increased energy prices across Europe. The result? Rising cost of living. Germany's inflation average for 2022 was 7.9%. It was the highest since World War II. In 2021, the average was just 3.1%. The high prices drained household savings. People bought only what they needed, not what they wanted. The government did the same. Public spending was down 5% in the last 2 quarters. Put together, they dragged the German economy down. The question is, what next? A persistent recession means trouble. We may have to cue the poverty pictures. So all eyes will be on the second half of 2023. If the GDP improves, it's good news. If not, you get the idea. Germany's fate is also linked to the world. It is the largest economy in Europe, also the 4th largest in the world. Around 32% of their GDP is made up of exports. The problem is the world isn't buying. Economic recovery in the US and China has been sketchy. German car export to China has fallen 24%. If that continues, the economy will struggle. But on Thursday, Chancellor Olaf Scholz appeared confident. He said the prospects are very good.
The German economy's prospects are very good. We are solving the challenges we face. You know, we have full employment. There is a public debate around a shortage of workers in Germany, and in fact, we have a big demand for skilled workers. To solve the problem and these challenges, we have now implemented as legislation the Skilled Workers Immigration Act.
There is good and bad news for Germany. First, the good news. Inflation seems to be easing off. Natural gas prices are also returning to 2021 levels. So consumer spending should rebound. The bad news is the gloomy global economy. Unless China and the US recover, German exports will not pick up. To be fair, there were enough warnings. Most of late 2022 was spent predicting recessions. Now, Germany has fallen victim. The question is, who will be next? Bloomberg says Britain is a prime candidate. It was given a 75% probability. So is the United States. It had a probability of 65%. And what about India? Bloomberg gave India a 0% probability, which is good, but the ripples from Germany will reach India. Germany is India's largest trading partner in Europe. Total trade is worth almost $20 billion. India exports clothes, smartphones, and leather products to Germany. The exports are worth almost $10 billion, but traders are expecting trouble. The recession could hurt India's sales to Germany, especially common use exports like clothes and phones. How big will the hit be? According to one Indian exporter, $2 billion. That's globalization for you. We grow together, but we also fall together. Biden's problems are compounding. The Chinese hackers are a menace. But the bigger worry is the debt ceiling crisis. It's like a ticking time bomb for America's economy. Next week, the American government could default. For weeks, Biden has been trying to convince Republicans he wants a new credit line to keep his government running. And it seems Biden may finally have a breakthrough.
Speaker McCarthy and I have had several productive conversations, and our staffs continue to meet as we speak, as a matter of fact, and they're making progress.
They're making progress. No deal yet, but the negotiations continue. Honestly, they don't have much time. America is literally on the brink of an economic catastrophe, a government default. It hasn't happened in America's history. Everyone is concerned, including the American armed forces.
I think there's no doubt whatsoever that there would be a very significant negative impact on the readiness, morale, and capabilities of the United States military if we defaulted.
A default cannot happen. They're speaking in loud and clear terms. That message is for America's politicians. The time for bickering is over. They need to act. And they seem to be hearing. A compromise solution is in the works. We have some specifics. Some reports have come out. They say America's debt ceiling could be raised for 2 years. The debt ceiling is the upper limit on government debt, so the Biden government will be able to borrow more, but they'll have to give up on some things, like spending on discretionary programs. This includes house and education schemes. There will be a cap on spending in these areas. What else? Some of the money will be redirected. More money will flow towards the military and veterans. We'll have to wait for the exact numbers. The agreement is still being hammered out. But if a deal is struck, this is what it could look like. So we could see an end to this impasse soon. Perhaps the US will narrowly avoid the default. However, the deadlock is already causing damage. America's credibility is taking a hit. Credit rating agencies have issued warnings they could downgrade America's debt. DBRS Morningstar has put the US under review. They could consider a downgrade. Other leading agencies like Fitch, Moody's, and Scope have raised similar warnings. That's not all. Experts are worried. This political impasse could have more consequences. The US economy could enter a recession. The economists are worried about the spending cuts. They feel the curbs could last for multiple years. And if government spending is cut, the American economy will feel the impact. There could be a recession in 2024. There are warnings about jobs too. The spending cuts could lead to layoffs. Going by one estimate, as many as 570,000 jobs are at risk. The proposals by Republicans to limit spending can reduce America's GDP by 0.8% and boost unemployment by 0.4%. Those are the estimates. Again, this entirely depends on what kind of deal the Democrats and the Republicans agree upon. But compromises will be made. That's a guarantee. Guess who will bear the brunt for this? Joe Biden, the US president. The spending cuts will impact his domestic agenda. Biden has projected himself as the president for the middle class. He is called Middle Class Joe for the same reason. And he is running on the same platform for 2024. The budget curbs will affect his re-election chances. Biden knows that. He's trying to protect the middle class from the budget cuts.
But Speaker McCarthy and I have a very different view of who should bear the burden of additional efforts to get our fiscal house in order. I don't believe the whole burden should fall on the backs of middle class and working class Americans. My House Republican friends disagree.
So that's the disagreement. The stakes are high for Biden. The budget crisis can not only upend his re-election campaign, but also plunge America into a recession. Now, we all know what burnout is. It involves long working hours, poor work-life balance, and even the glamorization of overwork. Burnout takes a toll on our bodies, and we know that it's bad for us. But have you ever heard of bore out? This word doesn't get as much attention as its workaholic cousin, burnout. But it's just as evil. Simply put, bore out refers to chronic boredom. It's normal for everyone to get bored at work occasionally, but being chronically bored for days on end may indicate a bigger problem. Bore out is when your job feels pointless and tasks seem to be devoid of value. There's a little bit of working and a lot of staring at the ceiling. There's maybe a little nap here and a lot of coffee chugging there. Maybe even online shopping and holiday planning. All while being at work, simply to pass time. Basically, you witness the slow death of your job, and it can be disheartening. You ask yourself, how did I get here? Well, there could be a number of factors. Maybe your physical workplace environment is demoralizing, or your job doesn't challenge you enough. Maybe the project you were hired for is no longer a priority. It could also be that you shouldn't have been hired in the first place, or that you were brought on board a little too soon. All in all, bore out is about people not having enough work to do. It is seen as jobless employment. And it is different for different people. Maybe someone is lazy and secretly enjoys chilling at work. Maybe someone wants to do more but doesn't know how to tell their manager that they are effectively jobless. So there are variations. But experts say the fundamental experience of bore out is its meaninglessness. It's when work doesn't really have a purpose, and bore out can seem like just a buzzword or even a laughing matter. But experts say it is just as pernicious as burnout, because boredom at work is a real issue. It is present across industries. It is bad for both workers and companies. Disengaged employees cost employers an additional 34% of their salary. Through absenteeism and lost productivity, studies say chronic boredom increases employee turnover, early retirement intentions, even poor health and stress symptoms, because people who suffer from bore out often suffer from depression, high rates of anxiety, even physical ailments like headaches and insomnia. The worst part is while in burnout, the consequences are drastic and quite physical, like a worker collapsing from exhaustion. The symptoms of bore out are more mental and emotional. Employees seem physically present, but they are absent in spirit. So bore out stays hidden from plain sight, and it can go on for a while. It can also be seen as a worker lacking interest or motivation, which is an organizational taboo. But at this point, you must be wondering, if it's so bad, why don't employees just talk about it? Because talking about boredom is also taboo. Experts say employees feel like they will have a target on their back. How does one tell their manager they are earning a salary for barely doing anything? Especially when layoffs have become a daily sport. There is a clear risk of things going south. Tackling bore out can surely be tricky, but it is time that we start by recognizing it and talk about it, because bore out invites long-term harm, both financial and emotional. And waiting for things to improve can result in years of just that, agonizing wait. And we should remember one thing, bore out is not just an employee-centric problem. Managers need to take responsibility too. They need to actively seek signs of boredom at workplace and find ways to mend things. This can include making minor changes to tasks or even job profiles and creating a workplace environment where workers feel valued. It's true that work can't always be exciting. It is unrealistic to pretend that it will be. But just as burnout is seen as the enemy of employee well-being, so should chronic boredom. And we aren't supporting the so-called hustle culture. Idleness can be good, but just how much and for how long? Burnout and bore out are extreme ends of the same spectrum, and they both need our attention, because being terribly bored is a crisis. It's a crisis of growth and a crisis of meaning, and it is looming large, all while workers are reaching the end of their rope. Except now, they aren't burnt out, they are just bored. And now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. A South Korean plane's door opened during a flight. It landed safely. Hundreds of people took to the streets of Bolivia to demand action on sexual abuse allegations that have rocked the country's Catholic Church. A 76-year-old man in India's Kerala narrowly escaped disaster after his mobile phone, kept in his shirt pocket, burst and caught fire spontaneously. And speaking of India, the country is all set to inaugurate its new parliament. The ceremony will take place on Sunday. The images have been released. And now let's take you back in history to the year 1940. What happened today on May 26th? This day witnessed one of UK's most heroic episodes in the Second World War. Britain began a huge seaborne evacuation, an escape from a potentially disastrous defeat at the hands of Hitler's army. Over 300,000 British and French soldiers were evacuated. We're leaving you with these images. Thank you so much for watching. Have a happy weekend.
Not tired, hungry, but their spirit was never broken. Their ranks were solid to the end. Earned themselves a new name, the Unbreakable I rail in Britain. Tired, but there was a non-stop buffet all ready for by the most terrible battle of all time. No, you can't beat a nation that breeds men like...
The US and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting.